Sometime in 2002, Alex Jones would release his special report called Masters of Terror, basically a compilation and expansion on many of his previous ideas about the government using terror to enforce new laws.
The president signed into law a new anti-terrorism bill.
You will lose your liberty.
Sometimes the spirit becomes so powerful in a place where it's like electricity. And you can't stay still. And you can't stay still. Power of spirit. Sometimes the spirit becomes so powerful in a place where it's like electricity. And you can't stay still. And you can't stay still. Power of spirit.
There is a chance for the President of the United States to use this disaster to carry out the New World Order.
This mass terrorism is the new evil in our world today.
Hello, I'm Alex Jones. I'm a radio and television host based in Austin, Texas. And for years, I've been exposing the criminal activities of the global elite, also known as the New World Order. My friends, throughout history, powerful people, powerful institutions have always sought to expand their control, to expand their hemisphere of domination, their empires. And they've always used terrorism, that is the threat of the outside enemy, as a pretext to get their population behind a war, or behind giving up their liberties, behind giving up their freedoms, as a way to, get behind the mother government, behind the homeland, to sacrifice. And Americans are no different. We've been manipulated many, many, many times. So now we're going to look at a few of the older examples and some of the newer examples of this, and then we'll cover what really happened on September 11th and who stands to gain. And I would challenge all of you out there to research the information you're about to see, because it's all true. It's all documented. In fact, in this film, we explore about 10% of the information. There is so much information out there, folks, so many documented red flag, smoking gun incidences where the government carried out September 11th and other terrorist attacks that I have rooms full of documents, transcripts, news articles that are all mainstream. In fact, the government never denies any of this stuff. They just put a spin on it that, oh, it's an accident, we screwed up. Well, you're going to see today the globalists didn't screw up. They carried out these attacks. Now, I just want to spend a few minutes here, going over just a couple of examples in the last couple thousand years of elites using terrorism that they perpetrate against themselves as an excuse, as a pretext for war, as an excuse to declare war on their own people or on a foreign enemy, to consolidate and expand their power. It's called problem, reaction, solution. Create a crisis, create fear, and tell the people, give up your liberties, get behind this war, submit to the emperor, cheerlead this expansion of tyranny, and we'll protect you. And that's the siren song of dictators. It's a fraud. It's a lie. It goes against every example of history we have. And for those of you that are doubting that elites could be carrying out these type of dastardly deeds, you just don't know history. And you don't understand that power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. And that there is truly nothing new under the sun. Way back, ladies and gentlemen, almost 2,000 years ago, Nero, the degenerate, inbred emperor of Rome, set the city ablaze so that he could blame it on the Christians, who were becoming a very popular minority in the city. He was having trouble persecuting them. The more Christians he persecuted, the more Christians popped up, the more people were converted. Well, he had a very successful purge in the weeks and months after he set the city on fire. And before he committed suicide, he admitted that he had set the city ablaze. And then, of course, we have some more modern examples of this. In 1898, William McKinley's Navy blew up the Maine in Havana Harbor as a pretext for war with Spain. And the United States expanded its control and grabbed dozens of islands, coaling stations in the Pacific. And now you read the history books and declassified documents, U.S. government documents, they admit that the U.S. government blew up its own ship and blamed it on the Spanish.
Deines Geistes Blutes fühlen und dieses Wissen zur Führung der Nation erhoben hat und entschlossen ist, diese Führung zu behalten, wahrzunehmen und nicht mehr abzugeben.
We have Adolf Hitler in 1933, just a few months after being elected, on February 27th, firebombing his own Capitol building, the Reichstag, and blaming it on his political enemies, and declaring a police state crackdown for the Reich's security, and announcing fatherland security, the equivalent of homeland security, and a new national police, and an end of local control. Everything we're seeing, I'm about to show you the documents, that's happening in 2002 into 2003. Then, of course, we have Roosevelt allowing the Japanese to attack Pearl Harbor back on December 7th to get us into the war. At least Roosevelt didn't attack Pearl Harbor himself, but they definitely had prior knowledge. 12 days before, it's a declassified public document, Roosevelt's White House had received the communique that Admiral Yamamoto would attack on the morning of December 7th and deal a death blow. In fact, U.S. naval forces, destroyers, sunk 5 submarines just a mile outside Pearl Harbor.
A few days later, the Trilateral Commission and the New World Order book would be released by Heinz Dussel. This book would mention Alex Jones multiple times and give him a lot of credit for the work he has done in their mind. A month later, John Ronson would go on C-SPAN to talk about Alex Jones. He is the one that he infiltrated Bohemian Grove with, and he had a few things to
Jones
say.
is what kind of a guy? How do you explain him?
He's 26 years old and looks 10 years older. He's a hero to the militias. He's a burgeoning new hero. On one hand, he's kind of like Tex Mars, you know, a popular underground radio talk show host. But he's also much more than somebody like Tex Mars. He's an activist. So he rebuilt David Koresh's church.
Where can you hear him?
Infowars.com is his website, and he broadcasts in like 40 cities across America. I think it's called the Genesis Radio Network.
Do you ever hear him?
Yeah, I've listened. He's fantastic. I mean, if he wasn't so crazy, he'd be the new Bill Hicks. He's got an amazing way.
Who's Bill Hicks?
He was an old comedian who died of cancer in the 90s, and again was a kind of hero to the libertarian left, Bill Hicks, because he smoked in the face of cancer and was funny. And but what happened with me and Alex was that we both witnessed his owl burning ceremony, and I realised that it was a silly grown-up frat kind of nonsense. And the only thing that shocked me was this is, you know, how the President of the United States wants to spend his summer vacations witnessing this, you know, torchlight procession, which I thought was kind of odd. But Alex, of course, had his own spin on it, which was that it was human sacrifice. Maybe that's a real person there. But so I went off with my spin, which was, you know, a kind of moderate spin. Then it's not that crazy, it's understandable. And Alex went back to his people with his own incredibly crazy spin. And, you know, just a couple of weeks ago, an Alex Jones fan tried to break into Bohemian Grove heavily armed and kill everybody there because he believed Alex Jones's spin of the owl ceremony as being evidence of human sacrifice. And I remember at the time, because Alex is an intelligent man, and I remember at the time saying to him, Alex, you know that what you're saying about Bohemian Grove isn't true. You know, you're playing with fire here. And Alex said, yeah, I'm not going to tell my listeners that. And it's kind of come back to haunt him now.
So
One statement by John Ronson in that clip would become very very important. John Ronson mentioned Bill Hicks, and this started a suspicion that Alex Jones is Bill Hicks. This would probably be because of his fan base is already prone to conspiracy, and a small subgroup would break off that believed Alex Jones to be the comedian Bill Hicks, and this conspiracy would last forever. In November, Alex Jones would give a speech at Mike Hanson's for County Commissioner 2001 fundraiser. He would give a long speech about Mike Hansen and the future of Travis County.
Jared, you guys are the core of a group that can help us get him elected and actually stop this massive police state takeover that we've been witnessing here in just the last few months in light of the tragedy of September 11th and now all of the anthrax outbreaks. How many of you knew that the Fourth Amendment got abolished 6 days ago, Friday before last? And that it's not sunsetted for 5 years like you heard on the news. Section 213, it's not sunsetted. So there's more propaganda out there, but the good news is, 8 years ago when I started ranting and raving about this stuff, about half the people thought that we were kooks. But now, I can't find really anybody that disagrees with us because they've seen too much of the evidence come out into the open. They've seen the documentation. So the key here is, wake people up now. Tell them what's going to happen in the future. That way we gain more credibility. And then as powerful forces try to use these crises to enslave the common man or woman, they will remember what we said and be able to counter it. That is so incredibly important. Now, the Howard McLaughlin group is going to be playing here in about 20-30 minutes. We're going to have some other great speakers for you tonight. Our first speaker this evening is Don Laux, and he's the first Republican county commissioner to be elected in the history of Bastrop County out there, well known for its corruption. He went through a lot of grief, threats, you name it, to get elected, but he's been doing a great job in routing out a lot of the corruption. And it's great to have Don Laux here, who's come out to our big Second Amendment rallies at the Capitol that many of you attended. That people like Senator Bob Smith in years past have been to, Ron Paul this year, former State Senator Jerry Patterson, Second Amendment Sisters. It's great to have these incredible Americans here supporting Mike Hanson in his run for County Commissioner. It's so important to get everybody registered to vote and to get out there early next year when the election comes up and to get Mike in place. Don Laux, County Commissioner, Republican, out in Bastrop. Thanks for joining us tonight here, sir. Don Laux, ladies and gentlemen.
Later that month, Alex Jones would release the article, America or Journalism? Must We Choose? It goes something like this. You are the editor of the New York Times. One of your reporters comes to you with confirmed information that the United States is positioning troops and aircraft to launch a major attack on Iraq with 48 hours. There has been little or no debate in Congress regarding the wisdom of such choice, though hawks in the Pentagon have already strongly advocated it since September 11th. Your reporter has found out that the president has decided to try to catch Saddam Hussein by surprise, hence the intense secrecy. What should you do? Since September 11th, American journalists have been trying to sort out what it means to be loyal to one's country. At the same time, one is being a journalist. Patriotism is defined in Webster's second New College Dictionary as love and devotion to one's country. Certainly in the wake of terror attacks, American journalists felt the same horror, anger, and sadness as every other American, and many journalists have been frankly described the surge of national feeling that came in the aftermath. But the job of journalist is such that we sometimes are at odds with the government we cover. Take, for instance, the hypothetical invasion of Iraq. If you published the story, the prospect of surprise will be lost, the likelihood of success will be reduced, and American lives could be forfeit. The administration is sure to be angry. And the chances are good that words like traitor and treason will be flying around if you don't publish the story. The president will have taken a risky, dangerous step without seeking a broad public consensus. Indeed, it is a step that many Americans would find reckless by publishing. American lives might be saved in the long run because of the invasion, but the invasion might be delayed, and public outcry might change the president's mind. History tells us that American media have been extremely cooperative about not releasing military information that might endanger American lives. For instance, the plan to begin the bombing of Afghanistan was widely known within. On Infowars.com, Alex Jones would post another article called Covering the Bush White House, an interview with David Sanger. Alex Jones would ask the question, one of the things that we said about the Bush administration early on was that they were businesslike. You've covered business very carefully. How much is true and how much is false about that, based on your experience? David Sanger would respond thusly, I think they came in wanting to run this very businesslike. And you'll recall that at the beginning, there was a lot of discussion, much of it I think misplaced, about how they were bringing in experienced CEOs, including at the Treasury and governors, because they had really run something, and they were going to apply a new business-like approach to running the American government. They are not the first administration to do this. The history of American presidents back to the past of the Civil War is filled with that idea, that if you could only bring in rational business to the government, then you would solve a lot of problems. In fact, that they have discovered, as many governments discover, that since the goals of business are very different to maximize profit for the shareholders, and the goal of governments are really to defend the interest of the United States abroad and mix regulation of the economy and general welfare at home, the model doesn't always apply. And in fact, some of the unhappiest memories of this administration, some of those whose power was mostly questioned, and those whom most came under the business model. Two governors are the head of Health and Human Services, Tommy Thompson, and the head of Environmental Protection Agency, Christy Todd Whitman. And both have discovered that they don't have anywhere near the kind of latitude that they had in running an operation. Because all governments are, this is very much run out of the White House. Alex Jones' political fervor kind of died down when George Bush won the election, not that he was happy with the other option, but he would regain this excitement for the political spectrum when Ron Paul announced his next run. He was a big fan of Ron Paul, and he thought he could get in to the White House, and Alex Jones was right behind him.